Hey everybody! Today, I'm counting down my favorite top 10 guitar players of all time. Now I realize this is a really subjective list. If I asked each of you to make a top 10 list of your favorite guitar players, each of you would probably give me a different list. There's so many greats out there. But these are the 10 that really struck me. These are the 10 that made me want to play. So without further ado, let's begin the countdown. Number 10. Jeff Beck. Born in 1944 in Surrey, England, Jeff Beck's early influences included B.B. King, Les Paul, and Steve Cropper. Beck got his big break in 1965 when he was asked to join the Yardbirds to replace the departing Eric Clapton. After a couple of years in the Yardbirds, he left and formed the Jeff Beck Group in 1968. This has led to a career spanning more than 5 decades, and it's still going strong. Jeff Beck has played with many of the greatest musicians of the last several generations, and his current lineup is amazing. Jeff Beck has been inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame twice, once as a member of the Yardbirds in 1992 and as a solo artist in 2009. Number 9. George Harrison. George Harrison was born in 1943 in Liverpool, England. He is best known as the lead guitarist of the Beatles. He had a more subdued guitar style as opposed to his contemporaries in the 1960s, but was a major influence on the Beatles' musical style. It was George who introduced the Beatles to newer forms of music such as folk rock and opened them to the music of the East, particularly that of India. George Harrison began his solo career in the late 1960s, and by the time the Beatles had broken up, he had released 2 solo albums. In the subsequent decades after the Beatles split, George collaborated with many famous musicians, including Eric Clapton, Jeff Lynne, Billy Preston, and Ringo Starr. In the late 1980s, he formed the Traveling Wilburys along with Jeff Lynne, Roy Orbison, and Tom Petty. In the mid-1990s, he participated in the Beatles anthology, which featured several alternate takes of famous Beatles songs as well as 2 new tracks. In the late 90s, George was diagnosed with cancer, and he passed away in 2001 at the age of 58. On the first anniversary of his death, George's wife and son, along with Jeff Lynne and Eric Clapton, held the concert for George, which consisted of his songs performed by various friends and collaborators. George Harrison has been inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame twice, in 1988 as a member of the Beatles, and posthumously in 2004 as a solo artist. He also has a star on Hollywood's Walk of Fame in front of the Capitol Records building. Number 8. Pete Townsend. Born in London, England in 1945, Pete Townsend's fascination with music began at a young age. He started to play the guitar at the age of 12 and was influenced by such greats as John Lee Hooker and Bo Diddley. Pete Townsend's musical career began in earnest in 1961 when he and schoolmate John Entwistle formed a Dixieland duet called the Confederates, with Townsend on banjo and Entwistle on horns. The Confederates evolved into a skiffle rock band fronted by Roger Daltrey called the Detours, and they eventually recruited drummer Keith Moon to form what would become The Who. Townsend was one of the more aggressive guitarists of his day and became known for his trademark windmill move, as well as smashing his guitars at the end of the sets. He was one of the first guitarists to use feedback in conjunction with heavy chords and has influenced generations of guitar players. He also invented the rock opera, composing the classics Tommy and Quadrophenia. The Who were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1990. Despite having endured the deaths of 2 of its members, The Who continues to be one of the world's top live acts up until this day. Number 7. Angus Young. Born in 1955 in Glasgow, Scotland, Angus Young emigrated to Australia at the age of 15. His fascination with rock and roll music began at a very early age when he was introduced to the music of Little Richard. Growing up, he was influenced by such greats as Chuck Berry, John Lee Hooker, Muddy Waters, and the Kinks. Angus Young's guitar style evolved into a much heavier and more energetic version of the blues, with a raunchy guitar sound and wild on-stage antics. He is known for this in addition to his trademark school uniform. Angus and his brother Malcolm formed AC/DC in 1973, when Angus was 18 years old. Over the years, AC/DC has undergone a few personnel changes, but Angus and Malcolm continued to be the core of the band. Although Angus considers himself to be a straight-out rock and roll musician, AC/DC have been credited in being highly influential in the development of heavy metal music, and are one of the highest-grossing bands of all time. Number 6. John Scofield. Born in Ohio in 1951, John Scofield was raised in Connecticut. He left the Berklee School of Music to begin recording with a string of jazz musicians in the mid-1970s. In 1982, he became a member of Miles Davis Band and stayed with them for 3.5 years. In addition to Miles Davis, John Scofield has recorded and performed with many great musicians including Jaco Pastorius, Herbie Hancock, and Medeski Martin and Wood. Scofield's unique style combines the best elements of jazz, rock, and funk. His guitar playing can only be described as mesmerizing. Really, if you aren't familiar with this superb guitarist, do yourself a favor and go check him out. Number 5. Mike Phillipovich. I know what you're probably saying. Who the hell is Mike Phillipovich? He's one of the most versatile guitarists I've ever encountered. Originally hailing from Kitchener, Ontario, this guy is one of Canada's hidden guitar treasures. He was a founding member of Canadian cult favorites the Bert Nielsen Band in 1995, and in the next decade, he crossed Canada 13 times and played over 600 shows. In addition to this, he has crossed Canada a few more times on his own and with other musicians. This guy is truly a pleasure to listen to. His range covers rock, funk, country, pop, folk, whatever he feels like basically. He's a gifted songwriter and can play anything ranging from well-structured songs to flat-out 20-minute jams. You can find plenty of Mike's solo work along with the Bert Nielsen Band online, so do a quick Google search and give him a listen. You won't regret it. Number 4. Stevie Ray Vaughan. Born in 1954 in Dallas, Texas, Stevie Ray Vaughan began playing guitar at the age of 7 and formed his first band at the age of 10. His main influences were rooted in the blues and included greats such as Muddy Waters, Buddy Guy, and Chuck Berry. With that, he took the blues style, mixed in some rock and a touch of jazz, and developed a style of playing that can only be described as frantic. In 1982, Stevie Ray and his band Double Trouble were seen by David Bowie and Jackson Browne. Bowie was so impressed that he invited Stevie Ray to play guitar on his Let's Dance album. Shortly after that, Stevie Ray Vaughan and Double Trouble were signed by Epic Records and their popularity began to skyrocket. Stevie Ray is credited with igniting the blues revival of the 1980s and has influenced a myriad of guitarists including Jeff Healey, Colin James, and even metal guitarists like Metallica's Jason Newsted and Iron Maiden's Dave Murray. Sadly, Stevie Ray's career was tragically cut short in August of 1990 when he was killed in a helicopter crash while leaving a gig. What makes this even more tragic is that his career was reaching epic proportions and he had really sorted his life out, overcoming his demons with drugs and alcohol. Stevie Ray Vaughan left this world far too early, but he left us with some great music and continues to influence legions of guitar players. Number 3. Jimmy Page. Born in 1944 in Heston, Middlesex, England, Jimmy Page began playing the guitar at the age of 12. At the age of 13, he appeared on the BBC show All Your Own as part of a skiffle quartet. By the early 1960s, he was working steadily as a session musician, playing with such acts as Marianne Faithfull, The Who, and Petula Clark. In 1964, Jimmy was approached to join the Yardbirds, but he declined because he was concerned about losing his income as a session musician and also about the effects that touring would have on his health. Instead, he recommended his friend and collaborator Jeff Beck for the spot. He eventually gave in and joined the Yardbirds in order to temporarily fill in for their departing bassist. After the Yardbirds found a new bassist, he remained in the band, playing guitar alongside Jeff Beck. After a couple of years, members of the Yardbirds had departed, leaving Jimmy on his own. He decided to continue with the band and recruited Robert Plant, John Paul Jones, and John Bonham into what would originally be called the New Yardbirds. The name of the band was soon changed to Led Zeppelin based on a joke that Keith Moon had made a couple of years prior, and the rest, as they say, is history. Led Zeppelin went on to become one of the most successful and influential bands in rock history. They released a great catalog of albums, and their live shows were not to be missed. Except I miss Zeppelin because in their heyday I was a little kid and I was too busy listening to shit like this. But I digress. Nonetheless, if you're still watching this, you probably know the rest of the story. After Zeppelin ended, Jimmy went on to collaborate with many other great musicians and continues to play his heart out to this day. Like others on this list, Jimmy Page has been inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame twice. In 1992 as a member of the Yardbirds, and in 1995 as a member of Led Zeppelin. Zeppelin rules! Number 2. Alex Lifeson. Born in 1953 in Fernie, British Columbia, Alex Lifeson was raised in Toronto, Ontario. In 1968, he formed a band called The Projection with schoolmates John Rutsey and Jeff Jones. The band's name was changed to Rush, and soon after, Jeff Jones was replaced by Geddy Lee. Rush began to play shows with various bands and recorded their first album in 1974. That same year, John Rutsey left the band for health reasons and was replaced by the great Neil Peart. Over the following years, Rush developed into the greatest trio in the history of rock and roll. Now, I'm an enormous Rush fan, and I believe that Alex Lifeson is one of the most underrated guitarists in rock music. Whenever Rush comes up in a conversation, people tend to talk about how great a drummer Neil Peart is or how Geddy Lee is an incredible bassist. I agree wholeheartedly on the awesomeness of Geddy and Neil, but let's give some props to Alex. He's this high on my list for a reason. Alex has raised the bar for guitar players over the course of his career. His skill and versatility have helped shape Rush into the musical juggernaut they are today. Nearly 40 years after the band's rise to fame, they show no signs of slowing down. Alex and his Rush bandmates will be among the newest inductees into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in April 2013. Number 1. Trey Anastasio. Born in 1964 in Fort Worth, Texas, Ernest Joseph Anastasio III, also known as Trey, moved to Princeton, New Jersey at the age of 3. After graduating high school, Trey enrolled at the University of Vermont. There, in 1983, he formed a band called Fish with his friends Mike Gordon, John Fishman, and Jeff Holdsworth. A later addition to the band was pianist Paige McConnell, who joined in 1985. Fish went on to become one of the most unique bands around. Each member was a master of their instruments in several different genres. Their versatility and original approach to recording and live performances have earned them a legion of fiercely loyal fans. These guys just don't play one kind of music, they play music. Be it rock, country, jazz, and sometimes even rap. They can pull off anything. Aside from Fish, Trey has played with countless other bands, including Oysterhead, the Dave Matthews Band, and Phil Lesh and Friends. He also formed his own band, simply called the Trey Anastasio Band. He's one of the most versatile, skilled, and influential guitarists of his generation, and has inspired countless young musicians. So there you have it, folks. My top 10 favorite guitar players of all time. I'd be really interested to hear who some of your favorites are, so why don't you write some of them down in the comments below. Who do you think really shreds? Who do you think really rocks? They're probably going to be way different than mine. But that's it for now. Until next video, keep rocking.